channel with all of our Moodle sessions and all of our Google sessions as well. So don't forget that you can always check that out. Okay, so what I want to start with first, just like I've done in all of the other sessions, is kind of look at some of the pedagogy behind using some of these things we've talked about, quizzes and assignments and all those things. We want to look at groups today. So what are some of the benefits? Why is it useful to use them? So I just have a short little PowerPoint that I want to go over with you. And then we'll go through the actual steps of doing it in Moodle. Okay. So really group activities, the benefit from them is it's really that collaborative skills. So it's getting your students to work together. If you don't ever give them the opportunities with any group activities, then they're really never going to get to work together. So it's really that collaboration piece. And there's some tasks or some skills that they can gain by doing group activities that they can then use in the real world. When we're trying to really develop those professional skills, those soft skills, what can they take with them when they're done here to go out into the workplace? So there's a list of things there, just some kind of the benefits of learning how to work with other people. So things like they learn roles and responsibilities, delegation of those, sharing their perspectives, pooling their knowledge, pooling their skills, and there's just a list of them. And I've given you some links of where you can go to read a little bit more information about those. But really it's just giving them the opportunities where they can learn some of those skills working together. And then, so that side was collaborative skills. Then there's learning skills. So working together, so positive group experiences have shown to contribute to student learning and retention. So giving them experiences to work as a group, but also giving them experiences where it's a positive thing. You might need to do a little bit of coaching, a little bit of guiding, giving them some tips of how to work together, some of your expectations of what you want them to do, the different roles they might need to take. You just can't really say work together in a group and get the project done. You might have to give them a little bit of guidance. But by doing that, to help with that positive experience, then they're also going to learn some skills on how to learn and how to do the activities that you want them to do. So things like breaking complex tasks into smaller pieces, managing their time, they have to have discussions, they have to explain things to each other to talk about the different pieces that they're contributing to the project, giving feedback, assumptions, communication skills. So really those are all things that would benefit them when they're done here, when they go off into the workplace too. So when you are designing a group activity, just because you give them that group activity doesn't guarantee that it's going to work. Maybe, like I said before, it helps if you kind of give them a little bit of coaching and guidance. So they can, and often do, they can backfire if you don't give them, or if you don't have the design of the core of the assignment done ahead of time. If you're not supervising them, you might want to always be checking in on the group, seeing how things are doing, give them opportunities to give you feedback on where they're at in their group activities. And then also you want to look at how are you going to assess it. So are you looking for different kind of milestones as the group moves on through the project? And you're looking for that deep collaboration. So not only do they have to meet the project at the end, but you might want to assess them on how well did you communicate, how well did you work on as a team, how well did you do delegation, time management. So you could give them a rubric where they do self-evaluation of each other. So there's a resource that I've linked it to that gives you some, I found it was really good. It went into all the different, like remember last week when we talked about doing assignments, there was all those different components of the different kinds of assignments, the audience, what you would expect them to do, all that context pieces. This gets into that as well. So how do you set up, how do you supervise, and how do you assess those group activities? So I'll send you this PowerPoint too so that you can have access to it. So there's the links. There's a few resources that we have. If you're interested in any text-based, if you want to read a book rather than just what you find on the internet, we do have a lot of print materials in our office if you ever wanted to come and have a look. And the library here on campus also has lots of kind of books about teaching and about assessment, and there's lots of good resources. So really the internet's probably the best place to start, but if you want something that is a more published, peer-reviewed, you're not sure if am I reading a blog, is this actually real stuff, like does everyone else agree with this, then there's lots of good print resources in the library. So. Okay, so any questions or any stories or anything you guys want to add about group activities before we get started? in Moodle? Any that have worked great? Any that have backfired? Nadia, do you use much group stuff in your classes? No.
One thing I was hoping to use it for was just so you didn't have to have more than one core shell for the same.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So so that really, and then so groups we'll get into now in Moodle. So if you want to pull up your Moodle core shell, you can. So there really are kind of two ways that you can use groups in your courses. So it can be that you have one core shell, and then you have different, you're mixing up your students in different combinations for different activities. So if for a discussion forum, you want them in one way, in an assignment, you want them organized into another way, or you can use it where you're teaching the exact same class twice to two separate groups of students. Rather than having two separate core shells, you can have one core shell, and then you can have the activities so basically one group sees one set of activities and the other group sees the other. They don't even know, you can completely hide it so they don't even know that there's other students, another section of students also within this Moodle core shell. So I'm going to show you basically how you set up and create the groups. It works either way if you're working with one group, mixing them up in multiple combinations for different things, or you just want to keep them completely separate in all of the activities. These instructions will work for either one. All right, so the first thing you need to do, or one of the first things you can do, so in your settings block, if you're on your main page of your course, and if you go into edit settings for the whole course, you will see if you scroll down to it's near the bottom, there it is, there's a groups block. So you can force it so every activity you do has groups attached to it. So if you are doing, like Larry said about having two separate groups where everything is it's either group A or group B, then you might want to you probably would turn this on and force the group mode. So that then would make every activity have to have one group or another. If some activities but if you were doing it the other way where you had just one group of students or one section of students in your class, but you wanted to do different combinations, maybe for an assignment, they do it by themselves, but a discussion, they're in groups, then you would probably want to turn this off. You would force it, you would put it to no, because then it would give you the option of some activities are in groups, some aren't. So if you are doing this as two completely separate course sections in one course shell, then I would suggest turning this on to yes. If you are doing two separate sections in one course shell, you probably also want to, in this group mode, put it into separate groups so then they can't see each other. So then if you had slightly different assignments, maybe for some reason there's a snow day, you have to cancel a quiz, or one group gets an extra couple days of class, just if it's a Tuesday, Thursday versus Monday, Wednesday, Friday class, and you don't want them to know that Group A wrote a quiz and Group B didn't have to, then if you do separate groups, they can't see that there is other groups there. If you do visible groups, they'll see the activities, they'll see that there's things to click on, but if they're not a member of that group that's been assigned to do that assignment, they won't be able to do it, but it'll still show up on their course page. So it's probably a good idea to hide things if you don't, or put it as separate groups if you don't want other groups to know that there are even other groups existing.
That's what you run into.
Yeah. Yes, and there was a few other little things we had to, some settings. Yes. So in groups does work, but you have to be careful. There's lots of little things some settings you have to turn on, and I think I've got them all in here now. We've had to fine tune it and try it and play with it a bit, and I think now all the settings, if you go through this handout, then it should kind of walk you through setting all that up. But we're going to go through it here too as well. Okay, so that you can decide then if you want to, I'm just going to put this back to no, my forcing the group mode, and I'm just going to do. Now, if you are planning to use groups at all, at any point in time, don't leave this group mode to no groups. You will run into some troubles. You'll have some troubles with seeing some things in your grade book because you're saying there's no groups, but then later you do create groups, and there's some conflicts with that. So if you think there's a chance I might do something with a group, then maybe you could even just leave it as separate groups, and then they won't see those different items. But it's just a good idea to kind of set that up, because this is right from the whole course level. You're doing this first. Okay, so we'll leave it as separate groups. I'm not going to force it though. I'm not going to do any default with groupings.
I don't see an option there. What is that?
Oh, did I have an extra?
You go to default group.
Oh, because you haven't set any up yet. We're going to go into that now and make them. Once you make them, then you could go back into here and turn on a default grouping. But yeah. All right. So let's just say if you made any changes, you can save that if you want. All right. So groups are done at the course level. You have to set up what your groups are first, and then you assign them to assignments and quizzes and or whatever, their discussion, whatever they're doing. So you go back to your main course page, and you go to your settings block, and you go into users, and then you go groups. All right, so right now I don't have any groups set up in this course. So there's a variety of ways you can do this. If you want to manually create your groups, you can. You can just go create group. But if you knew that you had, let's say you wanted to put everybody in groups of 3, you can go auto create group. So select members from groups, specify, I want members per group, so I want 3 people per group. This prevent last small group would be like, let's say I have 1 or 2 people left over. It wouldn't leave one person by themselves. It will then put them into a group of 4. So if you just want to make sure it rounds up rather than rounding down. How do I want? It's going to randomly pull people into this group. And I am going to call it, so if you either call it group with the @ sign, it's going to call them group A, group B, group C, group D. Or if you use group with the number sign, it's going to call them group 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'll leave it as the number sign. I'm not going to put it in a grouping yet, so I'm just going to put that to no. I'm going to preview and see how this looks. What am I missing? Oh, there, it's down here. Okay, so I have a bunch of demo accounts in there. They're not real student accounts. They're just demos. So right now you can see, so I had 10 people, so it bumped up and put 4 in a group, so I didn't have 1 person all by themselves. 3 and 3, that's my 10 people, so that works. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with how it just randomly picked the people. I'm going to submit that. All right, so now I've made those groups here. But when I go into an assignment, what it needs to know is that I've created, so group 1, group 2, and group 3 are all going to be working on the same assignment. I want group 1 to hand in 1 copy. I want group 2 to hand in another copy. I want group 3 to hand in. So I want those 3 groups of 3 to be tied to an assignment. But the way it is now, there's no way to kind of lump these 3 together. So what I have to do for that is I go into the grouping, and then I would say, so I want to create a grouping, and let's say I'm calling this, so they're doing group assignment number 1. So then this lumping together of, so group 1, group 2, and group 3 are working on this assignment. I then have to say that group 1, group 2, I think if I do control click, I can select all 3 at the same time, but I'll just add them all individually. So now group 1, group 2, and group 3 are all part of working on this assignment. So really what I'm going to get then as the instructor is I'm going to get 1 assignment handed in from group 1, 1 assignment handed in from group 2, 1 assignment handed in from group 3. That's assuming now that everyone is doing the assignment. But let's say, I'm going to do one more. Let's say there was a group, so maybe I had a few athletes in my class. They missed a quiz, they missed an assignment. I'm going to give them something to do as a makeup. So really, there's only 2 of them, let's say. These are my athletes. I'm going to call it that name. I'm going to save it. And I want to put some people in that group. So I click on add or remove users. And let's say it was demo student 1 and demo student 4 were my 2 athletes. I'm going to add them into that group. 1 and 4. They are group members. Everything looks good. Go back to my groups. So now I have this one, athlete group 2. I want to give just that set of 2 people a separate assignment. No one else is going to do it. So I can now, but I still have to, I always have to look at it at that grouping level, not those individual little groups. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call it, I'm still going to call it my athlete group. I'm going to save that. And then to put those 2 students into this grouping, I go in, I click on the little heads over here, and I'm going to put the athlete group into there. So it does seem a little bit redundant when you are just doing a smaller group. You still have to take this group and you have to make it into this grouping. The groupings, I think, make a lot more sense when you have like these 3 combinations are in one assignment, and then I might reshuffle everybody and do 4 groups and do it in another assignment, and then maybe the next time they're in 2 big groups and I put that into another assignment. You can, so that would be the typical way of doing groups, but you can just take a smaller, like just 2 students and put them in a group, and then you have to just go one step further to a grouping, because what you have to do then is you go back. So once you've done that, you've made your groups. Then let's say I make an assignment. I'm going to call this, so these are my athletes that get their makeup assignment. And I go down here and I want to just turn on. So group mode, I want just the athletes. Now you'll recognize here, this is now, these were the names of those groupings that I had. Group assignment number 1, I called it that athlete. That grouping, I called it the athlete group. There was a turf student one that was already in existence there. It's not looking for group 1, group 2, group 3, group 4. It's looking for that larger level of how they're being organized. So once you've kind of taken your smaller groups, so you may have to just take a smaller group, put it in another, it's always looking for the grouping name. It's not looking for those group names. So you might have to just do it twice, especially when you are just taking one smaller group. Then you go down to this common module settings, and I would pick just the athlete group, and then I would check off available for group members only. So only those 2 athletes would see this assignment that I've given them extra, just for them. As other students come into Moodle and they log into the course, they won't even see that activity even exists. But when those 2 students log in, they're going to see it then on their course page. So I do want to make it visible. So visible basically means the eye. Are you keeping the eye open or are you closing the eye? If I hide this, no one can see it. Even though I've said this specific group of students, those 2 students, I've given them this assignment to do. If I hide it, they can't even see it. I have to go in and show it. So it's showing to those 2 students, it's only available for them. This available for group members only, it might not be, you might not see it because it is in this advanced. So if I click on that, you might only see this. You might have to click on that show advanced to get all the options to show up. And then I scroll down, save this. Oh, did I miss something? Save this.
So Andrew,
Yes.
if you're going to make groups and you going to keep them separate for entire classes.
Mm-hmm.
To have that as a class, you have to make them both a group and grouping.
Yes. Yeah.
Then when you made a quiz, it's a lot of times I just go to the home page when it's time for them to do quiz, I unhide it.
Yep.
And then when as soon as they're done, I hide it again.
Yep.
And then wait until it's time for all of us to go
Right.
together before I show it again. I can still do that the same way then, but I have to go into the group and show just that group that quiz.
Yes, and what I would probably do, like you can see here now in the brackets behind it in gray, that is just the instructor sees that, and that's a way for you to know who you've assigned this group activity to. So what I would probably do is I would almost duplicate your quizzes, and then and you can just make it once and then duplicate it, and then it would just basically duplicate it. So quizzes, if you duplicated it, you could then go in and give different open and close. But you might want to, and you might also want to in the name, like say quiz, and you might want to put like section 21 and then quiz section, like whatever your 2 section numbers are, just so you can keep track a little bit easier which one is which, right on the main course page, and you wouldn't without having to go into it. So then here, you would go down and
as long as you keep it hidden from the other group, you can leave them all on there. And I just this is B, C, all the way down. The others never see the C side. If they're in D, they never see the other one.
Yeah.
Even if the eye is open, they still
yeah.
see it.
So then it's this common module settings. Here is where if you want to keep that they don't even know that the other group is in there, leave this as separate groups. Then in the grouping, so really all you would have in here is you would have section A, section B would be your 2. You would just then pick whatever one you wanted. Then, so you would have to, if you did duplicate it, you'd have to go back in and just adjust the settings and pick the other grouping and change the date and the time. If they're writing it, they would be writing it at a different time. And then make it available just for those group members only. So even doing separate groups, we still had to check this off, and that's where we ran in. That's where you had your troubles. That it seems like you're having to tell it twice. Make it separate and make it only available for group. But if you do that, then it completely hides it. And if you want to double check it, you can always come over and I can log in as different students, and we can just kind of quickly check and make sure because going in as an instructor and logging in as a student in your own, unless you have a student, we can make you a student demo account that you could then log in using that. But if you want us just to check it using actual real existing students, we can check it that way too. But
I found with that setting there, if you leave it as separate groups, but you leave that unchecked,
yeah,
you can see that there's another test. They still can't access.
Mm-hmm.
If they're not a part of that group, even if they still, I've had them go in, they go, oh, it says B and C, and I said, well, you guys are at B, and if they click on C, it won't let them in.
Okay.
But they can see it there, so I just keep it hidden, and then they never see it.
Right.
But
When you duplicate that quiz, you'll still see 2 quizzes on there.
Yes. Yes. So it will then make duplicates in your gradebook. Your gradebook will be twice as long, but then you're only logging into one place rather than 2 separate gradebooks. So there is a group override where you could say group A is the main group doing this quiz, but for group B, they get a different time. But we've had a few people run into a few issues with the override of it, so we suggested just do 2 completely separate quizzes, create one and then just duplicate it, and then just say group A gets this one, group B gets this one, and not worry about the overrides, and then I think it will work a little bit smoother. Yeah. So I think this group mode, like the visible and the separate, where it might come in handy would be probably in a discussion forum. If you made it visible, and so maybe group A gets a certain set of questions to talk about and group B gets a different set, if you made it visible, group A people could go in and see what group B was talking about and read all of their discussions, but they couldn't participate. And maybe an assignment, if you wanted them to know what kinds of things the other group is doing in an assignment, you could make it visible. But if really your point is it's 2 completely separate courses, I would probably suggest doing separate groups and make it visible only for those that are in it. So then if I save this quiz, So yeah, you can see I tied in this grouping, group assignment number 1. So then if I was to log out and log back in as a student that wasn't part of this group, I wouldn't, the link doesn't even show up. It's completely disappeared. Yeah. So then you as the instructor, if you go into your grade book, you go into categories and items, you should yeah, you're going to see these, and it doesn't show, like this was makeup assignment for athletes, and it was my athletes group. The grade book, though, doesn't show in gray. Like this one only looks gray, oops, because the eye is closed. If I open up this eye, so I just typed in section 21 into the name of that. It doesn't come, so that's why you might want to add in the actual group names in brackets, because in your grade book, they don't show up. On the main course page, they're in gray and brackets behind it. But in the grade book, if you just had quiz 1 and you duplicated it, you wouldn't know which one is for which. So it would be a good habit to get into with the titles of all of your activities to say which one goes with which section or group. Okay, so you can have individual items, activities, quizzes, assignments, those sorts of things. You can also have a whole block that a group of students can access. So let's say this one where I put in this one. If I go into the edit the summary or edit the settings for this topic block, if I go down here to the restrict access, I can make it so that only the students in this athlete group could even see this block. So I can save these changes. So this block right here, topic 5, you can't really tell from outside of the topic block, but it doesn't flag it or anything for you. But now if I was to log out and log back in as a student that was in this athlete group, I would see this topic 5. If I was to go in as a student who wasn't a member of that group, all I would see is topic 4, topic 6. Topic 5 completely disappears. So if you had content that one group needed, so maybe if you have like your trade students and then certificate diploma students who have similar content, but maybe the trade, like the apprenticeship students get a little bit different content than the other ones do, then you could create a separate block just for those apprenticeship students that maybe they get it, so maybe there's a little bit more detail they have to go into or less or whatever. Then you could give like certain sections. So you could even then have topic 1 being section 1 and topic 2 being your other section of students, and then you could have everything completely separate in 2 different blocks as well. Or if you want to have it by topic, like the different weeks of things you talk about, then you would just have all these different items that would be duplicated. So there's different ways you could organize your course, either 2 completely separate blocks, hide the blocks from the different groups from each other, or just hide the different items from the different groups. Okay, does that hopefully make a little bit of sense? I wanted to just check my notes. So unfortunately, you can't kind of create 2 sub-courses. Like once they log in, like you can't really, because all you get are the topic blocks. So you then I guess have to decide, am I giving them so much stuff that it would be more useful to have topic 1, topic 2, topic 3, or week 1, 2, 3, however you want to organize the course, and then just show each quiz twice, basically each assignment twice? Or am I just doing a few things? I'm just only going to have 2 blocks and have one for one group of students and another block for another group of students. So you just kind of have to look at what's the best logical way to sort it out. And in your grade book, so if, like, let's say in this case, I'm going to duplicate this quiz. In the grade book, it only will calculate the marks for the assignments that they are assigned to in their groups. So you don't have to worry about, like, even though it's going to show double and it's going to show all these quizzes, like they don't write half of them, you don't have to worry that they're going to get penalized for the quizzes they don't write. Moodle knows that if a student is not part of a group activity, it doesn't even show up in their gradebook at all. And Greg and I checked a few of his students last week, and that it does make the gradebook really long. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I've duplicated this quiz number 1, and in this one I want to, maybe I'll just say, this is my athlete group because they missed a day of class, they have to come back and write it. So I am going to make this, yes, yeah. So I'm going to make it separate so no one else can see it. And I'm going to pick that group of athletes attached to this quiz. And I save this. So there I can see quiz 1. I think it duplicated it twice for me there. So there's my grouping. Then now if I go into my grade book, you're just going to see them all, that's all. Oops. Oh, there they are. I dumped them right there. So there's the one I had made the first time. There's one of the duplicates. There's the athlete one. So it will double or triple your grade book depending on how many activities and how many groups you're doing. But you don't have to worry that it will penalize those students. So in your gradebook then, if you did want to start making some subcategories, if you were finding that the way it was organizing it, it looks too messy, we definitely could help you out with kind of doing some planning and organization of your gradebook. But it should keep everything, like if you are good about, like you have your categories and you just put all your quizzes in there and just try to keep them all in order, you'll just see all the duplicates. Okay. So I think and I do have a diagram in here. It's this one. This is where I've just tried this one with the little smiley faces in the circles on your handout. That was just my attempt of showing you like different ways that, like in this case, there was an example of 18 students. So you did a discussion forum and you decided I'm going to have all of the boys in one group and all of the girls in another group, and I had nine in each one. That would be one grouping. Then if I reshuffle everybody into 6 groups of 3, that's another grouping. So if you keep your 18 students always in that different combinations, then I think the groupings are a little bit easier to understand. But you may need to just make a grouping that is just one group. But Moodle won't look for the group level, it looks for the grouping level. So you just have to just do it again. If there is only one group, you just have to then put that group in a grouping, and then Moodle will then know to look for that in your assignments and your quizzes. So I know there's a few instructors have done some work this semester on using groups with like multiple sections. I know in one of the communication courses, because quite often a communications course, they do tend to keep students together as a group, but like I know Brooklyn had some equine students and I think some business students. So they learn very similar content, but their assignments are quite a bit different. So she wanted to create it so that they would have different assignments that they couldn't see, different resources that are more applicable to where they're coming from, the kinds of things that they're learning in their other courses. So she was doing it this semester, and I'm going to be sure to talk to her by the end of this semester now and just find out what worked and what didn't. But we set all this up at the beginning of the semester, and I haven't heard too many complaints from her yet, so it seems to be working. Okay, so that's what I wanted to go through with you today. If you wanted to stay and if you want to do some work setting up your groups, if you want me to check some things, help you out, make sure it's working all right, you might want to, just like before, it helps when you do a lot of kind of this planning on paper or outside of Moodle. So if you have your class lists, your 2 separate sections, to make sure you pull the right students, because you do have to manually go through the list and say, I want this guy in this group, this guy in that group. You have to pull them across. So I think there is a way you can import groups, but you have to, it's pretty specific of how you need to move that in. So I would recommend just manually pulling them over. So there, so that's that. I'm just going to turn off the recording, unless anybody has any questions that should maybe put in. So hopefully it's kind of given you some ideas, maybe some things that you want to try. And definitely please feel free to contact any of us in the ETC department if you are having some troubles, if you do want us to check things, if you think it's not working right. We definitely can probably get into a few things a little bit deeper and check them out.
Yeah, it's after Christmas before I see, like, before I'm going to be running 2 classes. The same.
Right.
So I don't even have a student.
Right. You could, yes. Yeah.
And then plug the students in.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. That might be, and that might be something that you want to do is try to build as much of those group activities ahead of time. And then all you have to do, even if you have the groups, I think you can create groupings with empty groups. So you could even go in and make all the groupings, attach them to all your assignments and quizzes, and then once you go in later into your users and say Joe, Billy, and Bob go into group A and 3 other guys go into group B, it will automatically just populate and fill up everything that you need. So, okay.
Took a Tech 1604 and then an AET2, both with a fuel injection, so created groups and groupings already, so
yeah.
just populate.
Yeah. And you'll just fill in the names once you get them, from your class lists. Yeah.
If you're if you
Actually, I have 2 apprentices, so I create a AET2 for a certain date and then another date.
Yeah, and you don't even really know that class until they walk through.
Yeah.
Well, the apprentices, they have a Moodle access.
They'll have Moodle access because Moodle's college account.
They get the apprentices get those college accounts even.
Yeah. So IT should do, whenever there are new enrollments of students, the registrar's office gives those names to the IT department, and then they just do a bulk upload, and they should be, there will always be a few names that are missing, especially if it's really late registrations that come in. Sometimes, depending on when they do that bulk upload, there is usually the odd person missing. If you do run into that, if you know that they are, like if they show up to class and they've paid their tuition and have a student ID number, you can contact IT, but you can also contact us and we can make accounts for those students as well. Or you can, and fix spelling errors, yes, if a student's name is spelt wrong, or... Just depends if any instructors have used Moodle in their first year. Some may or may not have, so...
Well, when did Francis go through that?
Mike is teaching the other half of that course, and he's doing 3 years old.
Yeah, but yeah, just because you have second-year students doesn't guarantee that they have logged in. They maybe never have even used Moodle, depending on who their instructors were first year. So.
First year full-time students, they've not been here before. And when I look at their login history, one of them has been logged in for just about a year. So what does that mean? Has he been here before with some other?
Possibly.
The student number doesn't indicate that.
No. Yeah, if you go into their history, it usually shows either usually it shows their last login. If it has been over a year, then he must have been here at some point in time and logged in. So maybe he was in and dropped out and then has come back, but yeah, somehow he did log in at some point in time. If it says never, that means they've never logged in.
Well,
yeah.
One student.